What have you been hearing and what have you been seeing about how children's anxieties during the pandemic have manifested themselves?
Parents have been talking about sort of an unravelling of their children's behaviour. So for younger children who were, well on the way to being potty trained, suddenly, not being able to manage those very basic skills, or being clingy, or more temper tantrums. Adolescents who feel like they're shouting back more than you would expect them to. On the whole, keeping a routine, getting up in the morning, getting dressed, getting your breakfast done has been essential, because that rhythm for children is the thing that sort of settles things down in your body. Okay, my mind might be whirring and I might be quite anxious and worried, but there are some ordinary things that I can rely on, and then everything else.
This is a full sort of body and mind experience. Whether you're a young child or you're a teenager, your body's still in huge development, and now you're trying to take all this in. Yeah. It is enormous, isn't it?
It is, and actually I think if you were to sort of almost put a little camera on your children and listen and see what they've been seeing, the overload of information has been quite phenomenal. There's definitely been more need for parents to be vigilant around how they engage with the news, how they respond to it. It's as if we've become a nation who've had to do much more talking to leave very little space for things to percolate in children's minds.
How have you been encouraging families and the children themselves to navigate bereavement in this crisis if they've not been able to perhaps attend a funeral or even see the loved ones before they've died?
COVID-19 has brought a different set of ways of grieving for parents, so how they talk to their children has been a real big issue. Be as honest as you can be. Don't use words that children won't understand. The person who died, their body wasn't able to sort of keep going, their heart stopped beating. I think children are much more able to deal with facts than the idea that people go to sleep, or that that there's something else has happened. So we've had a lot of questions from parents about, how do I talk to my child about this loss when I can hardly bear to be grieving under the umbrella of COVID-19?
And it's the intensity of lockdown that just magnifies everything, presumably.
Yeah, everything is magnified. And of course for parents, what we've been encountering is parents are worried, they've got sort of insecure economic situations. So hearing that your parent is not only anxious about the virus, their own parents, their own economic status, I think has been almost like opening the floodgates for some children.
That's a really strong way of describing it. I mean, put this in context for us. Is this the biggest potential mental health crisis for young people that you would acknowledge or you would recognise?
It feels enormous, but I think I'm constantly sort of pulling back from that, because I think that what's also amazing about us is that we can be incredibly resilient. And I think a key to that resilience, particularly for children, is getting back to school. And I think that's the bit that I'm particularly sort of exercised about, because I think that that's where children gain so much. And I think that's what we've learnt through the pandemic, that the loss of school, the loss of the ordinary structures of being with your friends has been, something that's been really quite sort of frightening, I think, for children.
It's not just the academic side of life. In fact, that's actually quite, it is a clearly very important part of their daily structure, but school offers so much more, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that we have had to really rethink what school life means. It's about friendship, it's about just being with each other, it's about talking about what happens at school and the ordinary sort of things that perhaps they hadn't even noticed before, about sort of messing around together, the contact. And all of these are important for the development of children at every age and stage. So, I've been quite concerned about social and emotional development. We know that brain development during teenage years particularly really ramps up. So the idea that children haven't had access to these forms of learning is concerning.
What impact has it had on those older teenagers that have missed out on their examinations?
We've got to remember that this is a rite of passage. As hard as it is, children will have been working their socks off up until this point. They've watched so many children before them in secondary school go through, you know, the proms, the parties, the celebration. To not have that, and I would say that the bereavement for those children, the loss of this experience, is something that we need to take some time to think about with them.
So bereavement can apply to simply the life experiences that you've lost.
Yeah. The loss for some children, the sort of mourning of the experience that they've watched, that they've been told about for so many years. You've just got to get to this point and then this will happen. You know, for the 18-year-olds who are going to university, you know, that sort of movement between those 2 points, the long summer for 16-year-olds who have, for the first time in their lives perhaps, no work to do. It's going to be quite an extraordinary period in their life.
We have been told that in England that schools will be opening by and large in September and everybody will be expected to go back. That puts quite a pressure on parents to start preparing their children to take that step. What would your advice to parents be about getting children ready to get back to the classroom?
I think it's a moment in time for parents to be doing that sort of gentle feed and drip of information. When they go back to school, they cannot expect things to be the same. I think this is also a moment for schools and parents to join up a bit more. So I think that phone calls home to children, so that teachers are talking to children about what it's like in the classroom now. I've heard that schools have been putting some videos out so that children can actually see what it's going to be like for them physically to get back to school. And I think those are the sort of elements of this that are going to make the difference. But I absolutely believe that children will manage this if they've been given the right information. Because, you know, for somebody like me who goes into schools quite a lot, what's wonderful is watching children as they adapt to things that are new. Oh, look at that. You know,
so we can take some hope from the fact that children can be quite resilient.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the 2 things that we can bank are that children, by and large, are very resilient, but also schools are. And I think we've seen that in the efforts that, you know, we've all witnessed, that they've managed to create these classroom environments that are as safe as they can be.
We've heard so much, of course, about protecting the NHS, about trying to keep the economy going in some reasonable way through this crisis. What are the risks if we don't get this right in supporting our children and teenagers through this crisis? What are the mental health risks?
I actually think it's quite hard to know what the mental ill health risks are for children post this period that we've been in. But I think what we do know is that we have an opportunity here. We have an opportunity to be really honest and open with children about what we've all been through and what they have been through, and to try and listen to them and meet them where their current fears are.
But this will forever be the generation COVID, won't they?
COVID-19 2020, I think, you know, is going to be a refrain for so many children, you know, around whether they did exams, what moving from year 6 to year 7 was like. I think there'll be so many of those sort of ordinary rituals that children were expecting to go through that have been interrupted by COVID-19 will become part of their lifelong story.